Hey, look, great. Dennis, Bob, great to be with you. It's been a great day so far. And, I'm looking forward to wrap this day up with you. A very productive first day of the conference. As you know, we've been sweeping from West Coast to East Coast. That was the only way we could pull off a Cyber Talent Week. And sitting from our home rooms, our offices, wherever we are. Um, but definitely looking forward to having this discussion with you as to uh, how can we bring privacy and policy, the two very key aspects of our digital life together. We are all kind of shield sub state right now, and just the prior conversation with our good friend Brian Hurd from Incident Response was like, "Well, we have been a shield substrate for the last 30 years. It's just the other people who are knowing, learning this now," which is very true, though. But I think the privacy piece, and especially the legal aspects and the bulwark around cybersecurity, is just trying to learn from our past mistakes, right? And there are so many new things getting thrown. And I know, Bob, you're passionate about cryptocurrency, and I'll probably talk about a little bit of that. How do you address that, and what kind of talent we need to get ready for that? And Dennis, both privacy as well as policy and practically implementation and security programs is something that we touch upon. So through the day, we spoke about the broad aspect of how can you bring the learning from the technology, the IT training, and the massive online courses to cyber. Then we talked about specific areas of progress, which is basically giving access to people to learn more hands-on. And then we talked about and the journeys of entrepreneurs, which was actually fascinating. Go look up that session if you haven't. There are four very successful entrepreneurs who shared their learning journey, and since there are 3 or 4 thousand cybersecurity technology companies now, and more aspiring to. Here's one more. So there is definitely a lot of learning from there. And then subsequently we spoke about the long career that typically the successful cybersecurity leaders have had, and where it started from, and the entire tacit kind of the ways to get to those long careers, the kind of stamina you need to have, and the the fundamental skill set and talent that you require to get there. Then subsequently, we had a great conversation with Dan Victor from 5DX about their learning platform and giving access to those underprivileged people who really don't have access to learning, and this becomes the door to a successful career in the digital world. And then also spoke with Nick Shevel, we have about CISO at Silicon Valley Bank, about his perspective about cybersecurity and how those programs, he has been there for 15 years. So kind of a long journey to this topic, where I believe, we need to dive down into specific areas. Every function and domain within cybersecurity has its own flavor, has its own culture, subculture, I would say. And, the leaders like you have shaped that over time. And those that are trying to get in, I think it will benefit them to understand and learn from that learning. With that, welcome to the program, and great to wrap up this day with you. Dennis, probably just give you a quick few minutes to talk about your background, your career, a little bit of intro, and then Bob will put you.
That's awesome. Yeah. So again, I wish we could have been on an airplane traveling and then having dinner and drinks after this, but unfortunately, they'll have to wait. It sounds like. But thanks for having us here. Yeah, I've been in the business now about 30 years. Oddly enough, I'm a self-trained privacy security personnel a person. What I mean by that, this was never my original intention. Originally, was to end up in this area. I was actually going down the route of law enforcement, but like for a lot of folks, computers way back in the mid 90s was a hobby of mine. And so I was kind of, I had a chance to be a part of a family that was heavily involved in telecommunications and, was a computer geek, if you will, in my hobby time. But I've been able to spend quite a bit of time watching the internet grow over these 30 years, from basically dial-up days, if you will, to the high-speed access that we have today, and be able to participate in building companies like AT&T Internet and Verizon Internet, and then moving over into the startup world, where I've gotten a lot more involved in building security programs and privacy programs from the ground up. And so, yeah, I've spent the last 25, 30 years of doing that, and it's been a great time being a part of it, and to continue to be a part of something that I think is not going away anytime soon. Because as the internet and technologies grow, there's going to be a lot of room for a lot of this work to be done out there today. So, yeah.
Excellent, fascinating background, Dennis. Bob, how about you, sir?
Thanks, Val. Well, going right back to the beginning, as a teenager, I had one of the first two Apple computers in all of Toronto, the first Apple II computer. And I wanted to play all the games. There was all these wonderful games coming out, and I couldn't afford the games. So I was a teenager, so I did what needed to be done to allow me to copy those games, and I played them once or twice and got rid of them. But that was my introduction into what we called cracking back then. It encouraged me to follow my passion at the time, which was electrical engineering. So I studied electrical engineering. I was a really good programmer, but it wasn't for me. I thought maybe going into law would be interesting, would expand my horizons. I did my law degree. I did a lot of privacy stuff as a lawyer, but again, it just didn't grab me. So you'll kind of get the picture. My career has been a progression of moving into different things because it just wasn't the thing that was grabbing me. So I went into business. I worked at a big company. It didn't grab me. It was a lot of bureaucracy at a large company, a large tech company. And then I figured, okay, so maybe I'm an entrepreneur. Let me try it out. And that was 10 companies ago. 8 of those companies aren't around anymore, but 2 companies are profitable and have succeeded. And that encouraged me to get into what I'm doing now, is advising companies. And more companies are in cybersecurity, because cybersecurity, as we've talked about, requires a lot of different things. It requires technology expertise, entrepreneurial expertise, legal expertise. And because of this career of mine, if you call it that, bumping from one place to another, it fits the needs of cybersecurity quite well.
Yeah, so no, I think both of you have kind of diverse backgrounds, and going into cyber and a broad space like cyber definitely is enriched by those experiences, right? So let me kind of pose the opening question that in terms of a cyber career, um, maybe the legal career, if you look at it from outside cyber, is quite well defined, and you know how to become a lawyer, and then probably it's as a lawyer very quite defined. But when you apply that to cyber, it becomes very interesting, because the law is still evolving on cyber. And how do you encourage, and what is your guidance for those that are trying to get into cyber from those two angles, especially privacy and policy? Those two areas are typically, legal professionals are more akin to getting into that direction. So, Bob, let me start with you, and then we'll go to Dennis.
I'd encourage, particularly for lawyers, first of all, I'd encourage them to, as quickly as possible, move from a big firm where you might establish your credibility into an in-house counsel job at a cybersecurity company, whether it's a cybersecurity startup, software company, or a large organization. Because then you get to see the actual operation of how things work from beginning to end. So you might be brought in because they're designing a new product, and you want to build in some privacy principles by design, and encourage the developers to put cybersecurity in their development process more. But also you're involved all the way along, so you can see how things were developed. So when there is a problem, you can more quickly resolve it in a more practical way. Too many times, lawyers at large law firms, they just see things from the outside. They're brought in sporadically, and they can't see the big picture nor the practical realities.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that makes sense. And Dennis, how's your experience in terms of getting an early start in a career of privacy and policy?
It's to get into these days, it's a little bit easier than it was for most of us who started this on our own, way back when. I think a lot of that comes down to the organizations, the coalitions, and the associations that are now out there. Like one of them that I work with on a pretty regular basis is called MOG, the Messaging Anti-Abuse Working Group, and it literally has all sorts of people in it, all from the technical backgrounds to the public policy folks, right? Because again, cybersecurity and privacy, has to be dealt with both on the technological realm, but again through policy, but also the regulatory realm. I love what Bob just said about sort of if there are attorneys or others that are working in much larger companies or in positions that typically are more strategic and less tactical in their day to day, to jump into that sort of startup realm and sort of get your feet wet. I had the pleasure of working with a wonderful general counsel actually at Eloqua before we sold it to Oracle years back, and I was the chief security officer for that company. He and I were able to really create a nice rapport between each other in terms of what his needs were and what my needs were, for him, and eventually really kind of helped drive what I would call like a security council, which was not just something that was run by the security team, but was a roundtable, if you will, of all individuals from all of all stakes, sales, marketing, the developers, HR, and including the legal side. And it's interesting to see that a lot of those folks that normally hadn't in the past ever been a part of a security group or a privacy group, how quick that they become interested in what's going on day to day. In recent years, I've actually seen two colleagues or two folks that have worked for me who actually came from completely different areas, one being customer service, right? Somebody who picked up the phone and make phone calls. They are now the chief privacy officer of Canada Life. And I'm very proud of that individual for digging in and starting to learn this sort of stuff.
They understand what customer concerns are.
Exactly.
Talk to the customers, because
that's exactly it. That is exactly it, Bob. That is exactly it. And so, yeah, by opening, by opening it up to everybody and having, that opportunity to, to play, I think, like Bob was saying, like if there's an attorney that's very interested in this sort of stuff, guarantee you, if you find the right company and the right, group of folks that want to work together, you'll find a great, rewarding path and be able to learn some new things. I don't know, Bob's probably seen this just as much as I have, but while I've got a lot of great friends who work for some of the large, law firms in DC, a lot of them have decided to move off and go open up specialized law firms specifically for this sort of stuff, because it is interesting. And again, it is an area that's just not going away anytime soon.
Yeah. Absolutely. When it comes to privacy specifically, maybe, we deconstruct this place. Privacy has been the realm of legal for a long time, right? And Dennis, you mentioned you were almost like, you had a self-taught professional, and then, now people go to you for guidance and, of course, professional advice. How does that come to be that the lawyers have this space, and still cybersecurity and privacy are not kind of, one is a techies arena, and another is a lawyer's arena? How do you see this working together? It's a very fascinating way to make this work together, right?
Yeah, sometimes it's not really meant to work together per se. I mean, it will always be together in a sense. I think that the attorneys and those that I tend to deal with are those that don't have a technological background. Again, I literally was a part of a 60-man team in the early days of AT&T, racking modems right into a closet. And again, that's how far back it goes for me, but also, somebody who's played the tactical role. And I've had that opportunity to go from the tactile side of things to the strategic policy side of things. So, I don't think it's that I know more about regulations or things like that, but I'm able to sort of, tell the story between, the hard technical stuff to the policy stuff. And being in the middle of that and being self-taught, on the regulations and understanding how those regulations are going to impact something like product development, right? Privacy and security by design, I think has given me, again, sort of an insight that, I see both sides of it. There are times, though, where I will definitely still go to the attorneys and say, hey, listen, there's this whole new thing that's popping up here from a legality, perspective. What's the risk in all of this, outside of the technology stuff? Or, how is this company multinational, not multinational, or clients that are global? How is that going to affect them and whatnot? And so like when I say that, it's kind of separate still, it really isn't at times, but yeah, I mean, you still have to have that counterpart, I think, because an attorney is trained in a very, very specific way to read things in a very, very specific way when it comes to risk and things like that. So it is a necessary sort of thing to have them still a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, Bob, your take on that?
I would concur. And one reason is that things are changing all the time on privacy. So yes, laws are changing. Different jurisdictions are changing their laws and moving things forward. But those laws are mainly reactive. And the lawyers are very good at understanding the different jurisdictions and perhaps even seeing where the legislators are going. But those laws are being driven by a variety of factors, policy factors, what's happening with the customers, what's happening with product development for business reasons. So that's one reason why all of this does work together. The lawyers alone don't have enough information.
Yeah, Bob, I think you're 100% right about that. I was just having some discussions with my good friend Reed Freeman out of DC a couple of weeks ago about sort of the changes in law, right? For the longest time period, as we know, there is no such thing currently as privacy here in the U.S. We sectoralize it by HIPAA and Greenwich-Bliley Act, and you name it, right? That's what we like to do. But then you look at other places like the European Union and now the UK being separate from the EU. It is a fundamental human right in most places. It has been since the early 70s, like in the UK. But, it used to be where the laws there, like GDPR, that was the bar that Bob and I would look at and say, okay, as long as your company, like even though that you're in the US and here's the bare minimum, if you make sure that your policies are here where GDPR is, even though you're not in the European Union, you should be fine. But now you're looking at California, CCPA, CPRA, Utah, Colorado, Virginia, who now they're the current 4 states. I've lost count on how many currently have laws in their senates right now to try to pass. Even the attorneys and like my friend Reed Freeman, it's like we can't even decide what that bar is anymore because each one of those 4 states have different things happening and some define things differently than others. And it's gotten to the point now where, as Bob is saying, it's gotten very confusing for everybody, technological and on the policy side of things, to go, what do we do now? Like, is it going to be a federal law? And probably is, obviously, as Bob knows, but I think Bob's 100% right.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is how the large companies have flipped on that question of the federal law. They didn't want any privacy laws or federal law. But now that the states are doing it, they figure, okay, let's have a federal law because it'll be one standard that we have to meet, and it'll be a lot easier than meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that tends to even the mortgage laws and as I understand, they're like state laws, and you aggregate that. If you don't have a federal level of, then you're just spinning wheels again and again. Twice. How about starting point for those that are trying to break into this career? Do you think if you pick up GDPR maybe as a good example that they can pick up, and then there is a certain expectation that it will be adopted widely? So if your understanding of GDPR is strong, then you can be have a good start of a privacy professional career.
I think that's a great idea, Dennis. I throw that to you.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people in general in companies that, it's just not my job to be the privacy person, security person. It's not Bob's job to be the only person who runs the legal side, right? I mean, Val, you've heard me say this before on other panels, but everybody watching is a data steward, right? Whether you're in sales, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in HR, it is your job to protect the company, right? It's your job to ensure the company's strategic forwardness, right? That it doesn't fail or doesn't get caught up in an FTC investigation or in a data breach that's going to basically lose the company. Because, sure, we're all working to make some money, but we're also working in some of these cases in startups because we want to make a lot of money, right? So it's our job to look out for these assets for us. And so I tell a lot of folks that, if you're in a company, if you're even just starting off right now, right? Get involved somewhere within the privacy and security realm. Usually companies, again, will have some sort of counsel, or they will have an individual like myself that would say, hey, you want to come listen, you want to come learn, you want to come be a part of it, that's fine. Come do this and be a part of it. But if you're sort of like, let's say, if you're still in, university, some of us in the last couple of years before the pandemic, we were helping SMU create their master's program around security and privacy. And then it extended out further into the bachelor's program. It was continuing ed, master's, and then bachelor's program.
Yep.
And one of my sons, who's supposed to be graduating here pretty soon from Dallas Baptist University, has an opportunity to take a cyber security class, and he is going to law enforcement, but he's actually taking an interest in this. And it's, real simple, not simple, but it's a course for him to get in. And he's actually going to take it as a credit towards his law enforcement because he wants to go into the FBI. I'm like, go for it, because you will learn from that. So yeah, I think there's a lot of wonderful ways to do that. And also to be able to join organizations. I mentioned, one of them is called the IAPP, the International Association of Privacy Professionals, that certify people like myself and Bob in understanding the laws. You do not have to be a privacy person. You do not have to be a lawyer to be a member of that organization. You can join it for a couple $100 a year, watch all of their online content. Even there was the event last week in DC, actually, and you can start to learn. And like my friend, or one of my folks, or who was on my team, who's now the Chief Privacy Officer in Canada Life, that's how he went off and figured out how to become a privacy officer. So he started going to those meetings. So join a couple of those things as well, I think.
Yeah, great idea. And with some of the smaller companies I advise, they're all over the map, not only in cybersecurity. What I do is I give little briefings to everyone and encourage that everyone, the companies might be 10 or 20 people, and they might have salespeople, management, technical people. And I encourage them to talk to each other and share the information, so the technical people will explain the constraints that they have and their abilities. The customer service people will express the concerns that the customers have, and management will say, well, these are the legal responsibilities. And then I might chime in with some law. But them sharing all that information, knowing what is needed and what is possible and what is required. That is how people learn, talking to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, maybe we use this to pivot to the next level of discussion. Probably, somebody starting up a privacy program, which I think right now is like more than many, right? Are looking to stand up programs, considering that there's only so many privacy professionals. Forget about when cybersecurity is already constrained, right? Privacy professionals. Do you see some career changes or transition happening at this point, where more people can be certain number of individuals, or certain individuals in the professional community can become those, foundation of the cybersecurity or the privacy programs?
Well, there's certainly a much bigger demand for all kinds of reasons. Just generally, the workforce, the more a recognition of the importance of privacy, given all the data breaches. But what you've got too is you've got the ability to work anywhere as a professional. So from a remote working perspective, there's a lot of greater flexibility in the opportunities.
Yeah, no, Bob's exactly right. In fact, I've been watching sort of LinkedIn and all these other places, but over the last couple of years, but even more importantly, since the pandemic and cybersecurity becoming more important with remoteness and whatnot. I mean, salaries alone have jumped. I mean, some places $100,000 or more for chief security, chief privacy officers, depending on where you're at. And within a lot of companies, what we're also seeing is that those that can't typically afford somebody, full time, because they're a 20, 40, 50 person company or whatever that is, we're seeing a lot more resident positions. We're seeing a lot more fractional positions now being advertised for fractional privacy officers, or fractional privacy people, fractional security folks. And it's a very good way to sort of if you've already gotten a little bit more of your privacy and security background, but not necessarily have been at that chief sort of level, or, taking a company public or something like that, it's a good way for you to get more involved without necessarily having to put almost 40 hours plus into something like that and still feel like maybe that you're not prepared for something. But it's a good way to sort of do that. And then I think the other sort of thing that I've been seeing as well, because is the startup community, right? A lot of us who work in investing in startups and working in the accelerator programs are also finding that some of these startups are just looking for advisors, right? And people that would be willing just to come on and say, hey, somebody like Bob, if they can't, or they don't want to go to Bob and pay for like a big clientele services, they may just ask for a real simplistic sort of advisor, or they may go towards Bob and do that. But yeah, no, it's a good opportunity right now because it's constantly exploding right now.
And companies are realizing the consequences, the financial consequences, the existential consequences of cybersecurity, but the financial consequences of data breaches, because the courts are issuing bigger and bigger awards. There's even class action lawsuits that are proceeding forward on privacy, so that's why there's also more jobs.
Well, and Bob, to add that really quickly, the other thing too that I think people have to also think about, right, is cyber insurance, right? We're seeing a lot of cyber insurance companies that are no longer willing to just kind of go, here's a policy, good luck, and hopefully you won't have to use it the same way that maybe your automobile insurance might go these days. We're actually seeing cyber insurance companies going, all right, prove that you have the policies, prove that you have the people, show me that it works. And if they don't, or if a breach has happened and they have not practiced what they preach, cyber insurance companies are no longer covering these breaches anymore, and it's going to have to end up coming out of your pocket.
And that's going to help because initially there was a good argument that cyber insurance hurt cybersecurity because it encouraged, say, ransomware for people to pay. But now with these policies and the enforcement of those policies, that has changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's bring to attention maybe one reason why cyber insurance was a good or bad thing, which is the whole cryptocurrency and the ransomware situation, right? I couldn't have a session with Bob without having that discussion. But Bob, let's keep it confined to the talent space. But I think let's also explore what would be the way or career journey for someone who's kind of getting into this, I would say technological policy and privacy policy and crypto all together make a very interesting combination, and for a very good career as a policy builder, right? And how do you expect people to navigate that part?
Well, one thing I just want to get in here. You mentioned cryptocurrency, and to stick to the jobs available. It's not so much on the policy side of things, but it's on the privacy side of things, the technology, cryptocurrency, and also criminal law enforcement, which is part of cybersecurity, is cryptocurrency tracing. I advised for a couple of years a cryptocurrency tracing company, and those jobs, there's a big need in them because, as you know, the reason why they use cryptocurrency when when ransomware in ransomware attacks is they don't want to be paid in cash or wire transfer. They want something that is a little bit more untraceable, and Bitcoin is a little bit more untraceable. It is traceable, and that's where these cryptocurrency tracing companies, there's some excellent ones out there. The governments use them, law enforcement uses them, but they need people. It's not automatic. It's not a piece of software that identifies how it's going. You need people, and I think that's a good way in.
Excellent. Well, let's break into another area, which I believe is getting a lot of attention, especially on the policy realm. By the way, the workforce policy itself within cyber is becoming big, right? So this whole cyber talent week is meant to be a forum where we can collect and gather ideas that will contribute to a national cybersecurity talent workforce policy. So it's not just the technical bits; it's the understanding of the implication of the technology and how business and nations kind of deal with it, right? Where I believe the law enforcement angle has been pretty much prominent in the cybersecurity space, but in the privacy space, it's more broad impact socioeconomic angles. So Dennis, maybe lean on you on giving a little bit of breadth of understanding for those that are trying to get into this cyber workforce, from that they don't need to be geeks and nerds. They can be policy nerds, and there are many ones, but what is your guidance around being policy people, but doesn't really need to have an engineering background?
Yeah, no, I mean, when I look at like most of my staff at some of these companies, I mean, again, I'm one of those people that kind of does both of it. I don't know. I just like to understand how things work, and one of my own internal policies is knowing what my team knows, and vice versa. I need to prepare them for my job in case we sell the company or something, which has actually happened before. I've actually had somebody that worked their way up into well, actually twice now, they worked their way up. And as we sold the company and the C-suite left, I was happy that they understood policy. But, we also have individuals on that team who would handle all the technical stuff, right? So yeah, you don't necessarily have to know all the bits and pieces and cryptos and encryption technologies and everything that's sort of going, on the ins and outs. Really, when you sort of look at, understanding policy, it comes in a couple of forms. It gets really sort of into the deep realm of regulatory, which I don't know. I like it. My friends think it's completely boring and they don't want to hear me talk about the regulatory stuff, by any means. But when I start talking about policies in the sense of like corporate policies and procedures and whatnot, I think most people understand or have a good understanding of how to implement those and then how to maintain and manage those moving forward. I tell people it's just sort of like a child growing up in a household. Right? There's a certain set of rules, right, that as a parent that you put on your child about, like you can't go outside without me, or don't want to cross the street without looking both ways, right? When you're interested in sort of, bringing in policy or being a policy person, you don't have to understand the technological aspects of hey, this is how a car comes down the street and how it brakes and how it doesn't brake in order to know not to cross the street and not get hit by a car. You don't have to understand all that. You just have to understand that you just need to walk to the street, look right, look left, and then that's the end of it, right? Then you can walk across the street. So yeah, I don't think you definitely have to be, technological. And again, the last 2 or 3 people that I've worked with, or at least that have even replaced me at some point after an acquisition, they didn't start off and never had an engineering degree. They were not my hackers. They were not my coders. They were not installing firewalls. They were just people who understand project management and understood that, again, this is the procedure that we have to go through. We have to kind of stick to it. And as long as you can do that, you should be fine.
And Dennis mentioned earlier privacy by design. About 10 years ago, I started a company, and we didn't know the word privacy by design at that point. But the founders all asked a lot of questions. It's a survey company, global survey company that asks questions of people in every internet connected country in the world. And one of the first questions that I asked is, well, why do we need to collect any information on them at all? Why do we even need to keep their IP address? And so we started asking all those questions, and we realized, no, we don't need to keep all that information. We don't need to identify people. We just need fully anonymized data. And that was, as it turned out, privacy by design. And the company were getting lots of customers, government customers, major NGOs, privacy associations, because we are the only survey company that collects zero information on its respondents.
I think, the whole concept of privacy was very intuitive to people, but it was not included in business, and the culturally so different until now, when data is freely available, and then there is no way to reel it back, right? So I think those that are actually privacy minded actually do have a business edge than those that didn't have, starting with, right?
Yeah,
So,
and that was one of the reasons I asked the questions, because I was early on. I actually advised the European Commission on some of its early privacy principles. So that was front of mind when this question came up. So I guess it's just an example of when you're coming from left field. This was a technology company, had nothing to do with privacy, but because 20 years ago, I had some experience in the area, I asked the question.
Yeah,
and it turned out to be important.
Right. Yeah, I think we are now dealing with, I've been doing this little traveling keynote, prior to the pandemic, to kind of explain privacy, where it has been, why where we're at today with it, and why it's such an important topic, right? And part of that presentation, I talk about how people always, wake up in the morning and either they, turn on their phone and they read the news, or for those that are old enough who still read a newspaper, they open it up and it's still, it screams data breach or data misuse, right? Cambridge Analytica. But, we've gotten to the point now where citizens are sick and tired of their data being stolen or being misused. We have attorney generals, we have, the regulators are all asking for answers, and they're asking for ways to sort of get privacy under control in a sense, right? But I think people hopefully now know, I mean, after watching all these things happen, that privacy is the currency that we pay to play in this ecosystem. Like when I'm on Facebook, I know that what I'm putting out there, at least what I need to decide to put out there, is going to be now Facebook's, right? Let's just be honest, or somebody else is going to be able to see it, or it's going to be used to market it to me. But the problem that we have is that consumers like us are so used to having things subsidized, right? We're so used to having free internet radio and free YouTube videos and all of this sort of stuff. And so we sort of still think that that's the thing, right? As Bob and the rest of us have heard, we are the product, right? RPI is the product. And so, yeah, I mean, what we are seeing is that people hopefully are becoming more apt to thinking about, okay, do I want to work with Facebook, or do I want to do this anymore? I'm seeing tons of my friends, and even I took the app off my phone about 2 years ago. I mean, I'm still on it to share family information, but I'm not nearly on it as much as I used to be. And that's not to say that I'm stopping them from tracking me any further, but I think consumers are starting to realize that, I'm going to back off. I'm going to think a little bit more about what I'm putting out there on the internet, because I'm tired of being the product. I'm tired of seeing, content that's sent to me that's irrelevant or that's being misused. So yeah, I think it really comes down to, again, consumers knowing more about what's happening and then having some control in that. And some companies are doing that, and the regulatory people are making that happen as well with some of these state laws.
I agree. I think it's summed up, as you said, Dennis. If you're not paying for a product, then you're the product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then if you are paying, then be careful what ends up outside that yeah, right, because you're paying for a certain service and there are so many ancillaries around it. Yeah, so well, this has been a great discussion. I think we got some really great insights into how we can make this career journey in this particular field, especially privacy and policy. And of course, we touched a lot around regulation, legal as well. Could be a place where people could start in cyber. There's definitely an insatiable demand at this point. If you are trying to address the cybersecurity talent workforce, just wait until you hit the privacy, because privacy has both policy and a broad-ranging aspect, as well as the privacy tech that's in place right now. That will be another kind of burgeoning industry, or already is. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Have a great evening, and thank you for helping us wrap this incredible day of knowledge and insights to build towards the Cyber Talent Week. So really grateful to have you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Val.
Okay, thank you.